You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are grey. You never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Well, we've got such glorious sunshine today that I felt this is how we should begin our little trip to Inchigeelagh today. We're right here by, as they call it, Timmy Johnny's shop. I think it's like Inchigeelagh's Ponte Vecchio. It was built as a bridge spanning the stream here, and I suppose the story behind it was in the early 20th century, the enterprising couple, Timmy and his wife Dorothy, she was a local midwife and he sold bicycles, and they rapidly ran out of space for their bicycle trade, so he was enterprising and he built across the river. Locally we call this area the Square, and I suppose it has been home to a lot of activity over the years. In the Square you've got the two hotels, Lake Hotel and Creedon's Hotel, and this saw a lot of activity during the War of Independence, where most of the two hotels were commandeered, firstly by the Crown Forces in the War of Independence, but in the Civil War you had the Irish Free State Army coming yet again to commandeer the hotels, and there were sentry points put up in the village from the western end by O'Leary's Mill to Twig's house opposite the church and down to Casey's funeral home. So at the time the rhyme went from Badger's door to Casey's door and back to the farmer's gate. So that's where the sentry points were, and the village was a very busy spot. In my young days there were nearly 14 shops in the village, so a lot of commerce went on in the village itself, and the markets and fairs were chiefly kind of in the 19th century were the butter markets, and the roads into the village were the butter roads, and right into even my school days in the early 60s there was still a weekly market, and the market would have had rabbits during the war years, but they bought and sold fowl mostly, so they were known as the hucksters. There were 4 or 5 hucksters that bought and sold here every week. But the Inchigeelagh Fair was held 3 times a year in the Fairfield, and that's why there are so many pubs in the village, because the pubs likewise gave warehousing, so that the last pub in the village was the O'Sullivan's pub, or the Briar Rose, and that was near the Fairfield house, and it's a pretty old building, and the coaching routes from Macroom to Glengariff, Inchigeelagh was very much a stop-off point, and they would have had this for an overnight possibly, and you had a lot of business around coaching. You had the 2 blacksmiths in the village, and the coach house and the hotels that supplied the coaches, and across from us here, those houses, the name of the house is called, the name of that property is called the Fairfield. So it was in that field behind those that the very, very famous Inchigeelagh fairs were held, and these were happening well before 1800, so probably the licence for the fairs go back to the 1700s. So we have a little reminder here of a family that lived just across the stream. So the stepping stones are still there. We always, as children, used to love to play at the stepping stones. But there were the access to the single-roomed house that stood in the corner of the field. It's you can only barely see one wall of it there now. And they were an O'Driscoll family, and the O'Driscolls were harness makers. and I think there were 11 children reared in that house, and all of them emigrated to America. And as I said, the harness maker fitted in with the blacksmith and the coach house as somebody who was very involved with transport and the coaching business that went on at that time. The football club is just behind us, and I walk up a small bit and we might just see the name is called, we used to call it the Derryvan River, and that relates to the townland of Derryvan that it runs through, which is known as the Own Gareth, the rough stream. And you can see the football field and club over here, but in the distance you have the townland of Grag and Bishop Buckley's home place. He was a native, and he's a very popular son. We may as well shake hands to a man that's walking past us here. He's our parish priest, and I'll shake hands with him. Father Anthony. We were talking about Bishop Buckley, your former boss.
Well, as long as you're saying, I'm sure you're saying good things about him. So
I am, and we say good things about all our parish priests too. We were very lucky in this man.
Within your shot anyway, as the lads say.
All the best. B is my brother's truck, and he has a transport business, but the transport, the history behind it was that I suppose our eldest ancestors, we can trace them back to about 1835, and they were butter merchants, so they were transporting butter from here to the butter market in Cork, and it was something that the family always did, was the transport. So it is still happening today, and you can see the field, and the field is quite a big area, and it runs right down to the River Lee. And there's a beautiful cedar tree growing at the end of it. But I have memories of the Inchigeelagh races being held here when we were young, and somewhere by the cedar tree is where that military barracks of the 18th century stood. But I think that a lot of the stonework from that was taken over to build the church with the stone from it. And you can see from the church building that the stone is red sandstone, which is local to us here, and it is capped with limestone. And you can see there's a really nice red hue to it.
Oh, too often my thoughts in their fancy take flight to the home of my childhood away, to the days when each patriot's vision seemed bright. Here I dreamed that those joys should decay, when my heart was as light as the wild winds that blow down the Mardyke through each elm tree, where we sported and played neath the green leafy shade on the banks of my own lovely Lee, where we sported and played neath the green leafy shade on the banks of my own lovely Lee. And then in the springtime of laughter and song, shall I ever forget the sweet hours with the friends of my youth, as we rambled along by its green mossy banks and wild flowers? And then in the evening, sun sinking to rest sheds its golden light over the sea. The maid and her lover, their hands wild daisies pressed on the banks of my own lovely Lee. The maid and her lover, the wild daisies pressed on the banks of my own lovely Lee.